All right, it's Monday morning and here for another episode of EV Obsession. I'm your host, Zach Shahan, and my guest today is, as always, is Joe Borras.
We haven't been doing this long enough to have a lot of inside jokes, but you being the host is quite humorous.
I have a feeling we will have a lot.
Congratulations.
You have to, this show has to have good inside jokes. Yeah, well,
I just can't believe that we honestly sat down. We blocked this out, and we thought, yeah, Monday is going to be pretty light. Maybe we'll be able to knock those out in 20, 30 minutes and just make it a shorter day.
I mean, once a week or twice a week. How many times a week should we do a news show? Like, we have
You
so
think
many
there's enough
stories
news to
to
do
get
twice
through.
a week?
The biggest news, I mean, the breaking news right now is Tesla's quarterly sales, but we'll get to that second. I'm gonna start with my first I gotta share the screen here. Let's get this going. We're gonna so I've had
We'll
a
figure
Tesla
this out
Model
eventually.
3 Standard Range Plus for 4 years, a little bit more than 4 years. And that every time I spend any money on it for service or maintenance, I do an updated cost of service and maintenance and cost of ownership sort of report. Just add up the latest expense. So in this case, I finally bought windshield wipers. Took me 4 years,
How did they only cost you $23? I think the wipers on mine are like $78.
wow, yeah, no, I mean,
And when I say I know they're $78.
yeah. Oh, sorry, that's not even the one we're starting on. Well, we're gonna start on that one
We're
now.
there now.
Yeah. So this is a 4-year cost of ownership update. And normally I just do like cost of maintenance and service because cost of ownership is complicated. But I did decide to just get into the weeds a bit later on in the article about cost of ownership. But to start with, yeah, $23 was the cost of the windshield wiper blades. I don't know how I made it 4 years without getting new windshield wiper blades, but I know I should have got them several months ago. But I finally got them, added
Like
that on.
36 months ago.
Yeah. And my new total maintenance and service costs for 4 years and 1.5 months is just over $2,000. That includes tires, although I need a new set of tires now as well. So that's going to jack up the cost here pretty soon. I did take a little bit of a look on cost of ownership. So I had a down payment of $9,450, financing. My finance payments for 4 years and 1 month come to about 43,000. And yeah, so that's where we're at. If you extend it out, you might end up with a 10-year cost of 60,000 if I had no more service and maintenance costs. Or sorry, if they had the same average, if they averaged the same annual costs as they have so far. But that's probably not going to happen because I'm going to be out of warranty and I'm going to have other costs that probably aging vehicles have. So, but if it did come to 60,000, that would end up being about $6,000 a year over 10 years. Of course, then you would subtract also resale value and all that kind of thing, but it's far out. So this is just sort of fun with numbers, and that's
Fun with numbers. Well, let me ask you a quick question on that because you made a comment that you were coming out of warranty. And, we've been talking a lot to a couple of guys, the X-Care guys, my friend Brent Seavey, who I've known for many, many years, and, also KJ, who's the founder. They have their new battery and battery and drive unit warranty product. Have you looked into those? Have you looked into those
well,
kind of other warranties, or are you thinking you get out of it before it's going to be an issue?
well, my battery and powertrain warranty are much longer, I think, but it's just the other basic warranty for the rest of the car that
Mm-hmm.
that just expired. And I had a chance, like Tesla just introduced extended warranty so several months ago. So I wrote a couple of articles like asking what do you guys think? Should I get the extended warranty? Some people say yeah, some no, but I mean the general consensus was like obviously they expect to make money on extended warranty.
Right.
Like, so on average you would lose money on one, right? But of course if you don't get it, you end up with the nightmare breakdowns that you think, oh, I should have got an extended warranty, and if you get it, you end up not using it, right? So I didn't get it. I was like, we're gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
My main
Best
concern
case
really was
scenario
like,
is you don't use it.
Yeah, and my main concern was like, well, what are they actually going to cover? Like, because I've had a number of things done that are like, okay, we'll cover that, but that's not really under the warranty. And I was like, well, what the hell is under the warranty? I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I like that we're having a really extended long-term cost of ownership analysis on the vehicle. But anything else, or we move on to?
No, I think this is hugely important, and I think the ability to factor in depreciation at the end of all this, I think is critically important, right? Because if you look at a net cost and you figure it's $60,000 to own this thing for 5 years, and then you sell it for 40, well, then your net cost is 20, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to sell it for 40. I think probably, but that's beside the point.
Well, that's what blew my mind too, because this BMW i3 range extender, with a range extender, is pretty much identical to what I bought 5 years ago, and
Yep.
I bought it for 16,000 and selling for 17,000 now. So there's a
Yeah.
there's a kind of like, who knows what the cost is going to be after, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little disappointed with how much the Model 3 has depreciated. So, Tesla gave me an estimated trade-in value of like $20,000. So I was like, well, that's huge depreciation compared to, what I would hope for. So I'm like, well, we'll hold it for 10 years and see if it's much different in another
Yeah.
6 years. But
Think of how far we've come, that your Tesla Model 3 at the turn of the century, we'll say 20 years, 25 years ago, make it a nice round quarter century. 25 years ago, that car would have been the supercar to end all supercars.
yeah,
You could have put that thing on Willow Springs with darn near anything that Porsche or Corvette, or with the exception of like the most exotic, F50s or Ferrari Pininfarinas, any Lamborghini Gallardo or anything like that, you could have put it on the track with the Tesla, and the Tesla would have given it a good run for its money, if not totally obliterated it, right? And now they're 20 grand.
no, it's pretty wild. I mean, yeah, and the option to get one of these for 20, I mean, I just don't see it dropping much lower. Like the i3
No, I don't think
is
so either.
it's only going to drop so low. It seems like, even with 70 miles of electric range and like tiny size and everything. So, but this
Well,
was
it goes
even,
back to what you need. Like 70 miles of electric range is going to do just about everybody, 90% of their around town everyday driving.
oh yeah, no, I had it for 9 months before we got the Model 3, and I sold the BMW i3 to my mom. But at 9 months, I had spent $5 on gasoline, and probably half of that was because every once in a while the engine has to run to stay fresh. So, we had, with 70 miles of electric range, we didn't really need the gas backup. Of course, if my mom's driven it up and down between Florida and North Carolina and back, and that's she's done that fine because of the range extender. But then normal driving, the electric battery does everything. So it's really, I think it's a great matchup. This
Yeah,
is
I
a
think this is good.
this was an exciting one for me, because I've had all these free supercharger miles from referrals like the whole time I've had the car. And so I was like, well, I'm going to use them. I'm going to go ahead and get my free supercharging. It's right behind Whole Foods. We do a lot of shopping there. So, I stop there once or twice a week and charge up. So my concern has always been, oh, you're supposed to not fast charge a lot because it's supposed to wear down the battery faster. Well, Recurrent Auto, which has thousands of EVs in its fleet, has found that's not really happening with EVs, that fast charging doesn't seem to be connected to any more battery degradation than not fast charging. And it did a study on this earlier this year. And then recently it just looked at Model 3 and Model Y vehicles, and it found that there's no significant difference between vehicles that charge more than 90% or more with fast charging, and I did it 85% of the time I supercharged the past year, 90% of the time the last month. So that's my category. That's my territory. They had no more battery degradations, no significant difference than people who charged less than 10% of the time, or 10% or less of the time, with fast chargers, with Tesla superchargers. And in fact, if you look at the Model Y, again, no statistically significant difference, but if you look at the Model Y, It's actually the ones who rarely fast charge who had their range drop a bit more. But
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 90. If you look at the left side of the graph, we're
yeah,
talking about 91% versus 91.8% or something, right?
and
So
it's
it's
not
really,
statistically
really close.
significant.
It's not statistically significant. Exactly right. I think stuff like this is crucially important to get out there. News like this is important to talk about because I see this all the time on LinkedIn, especially from the dealer groups. I was actually so frustrated with one of the dealer group calls. I didn't go on it today. But there's this there's this scenario where it's almost like, you get a little bit of information and you become like the super battery expert, right? Even though it's totally wrong and your conclusions are completely wrong. But you'll get these guys say, well, you can't, it says it's got 200 miles of range, but you can't charge it more than 80% or else the battery degrades. And it's like, no, that's not what it says at all. Like that, it
Will
says that it's
explode in your
fastest up to,
eyeball.
it'll in your eyeballs, right? Right. It'll burn your entire house down. And like, no, that's not true. And then you get these other guys say, well, if you leave it plugged in overnight, it'll, burn itself to the ground. It's like, no, that's not true either. Like you guys are you're like hearing the headline and you're thinking that, that's like almost like picking up a book, like a textbook from school that says algebra, and you look at it and read algebra and go home and think algebra,
Yeah,
right? Like that,
you're
it's
like,
that
oh,
level
I've
of
seen the
ignorance.
equation on the cover.
Yeah, E equals MC squared. That makes me Einstein. And
Yes, exactly.
it's such a bizarre sense of confidence. And I've read about it before XKCD is this great web comment. They call it Mount
Oh,
Stupid, that you get like a little bit of knowledge and your confidence is like way up here to be able to speak to a topic. And then as you learn more, you're like, oh no, we don't know. We actually don't know.
yeah.
Um,
I don't know anything about that. I never, no, no, actually,
I've
what I,
never done that. What are you talking
yeah,
about?
no, one thing I
That
learned
whole
from,
Elio thing seems super legit.
yeah, one thing I learned from this job early on was like, just don't assume you know stuff. And like, if I
Yeah.
don't really feel like I have thoroughly researched something, I'm like, well, I think this might be true, but I don't really know because I'm not an expert. And everyone expects they're an expert as soon as they learn something, spend 10 minutes learning about something. So I try not to be like that. But I found one of the most interesting things about this was in the comments. Of course, we've been told this many times. I say this all the time. The best thing about Clean Technica is our comment section. We have very informed, engaged, intelligent commenters. Some
Usually.
articles, yeah, it depends. But no, we have really good ones. But there were some interesting comments here. One was potentially there would be more degradation from people who charge at home all the time because it's actually more harmful to leave the car charged at a very high charge rate, very high state of charge, than it is to fast charge it. And if you're relying on fast charging and then coming home, it's not sitting at a high state of charge. Some people might charge up to 90% all the time, leave it plugged in at 90% and just always have it at 90%, which is not as good as having it around 60, 70, 50 most of the time. Another point, which Freedom EV, who you've known for a long time and knows a lot about EVs, he makes EVs. He noted that EVs should be charged to 100% and down under 5% at least once a month to keep them active. That this can extend the range, the long-term longevity of EV battery packs, because you don't want the chemistry just sitting there, the chemicals, and if they're just sitting there too long, that's when things can go wrong. So you do this to
Yeah.
move them around. I thought this was out of date. I thought this was like something that battery packs now manage on their own, so you don't need to do this. But a funny thing is, someone in Australia commented that his new EV owner's manual specifically says the same thing now. It tells him to trickle charge to 100% once a month.
So
And this is an MG4. So this is
yeah, so
also,
I think that there's Freedom EV is a really sharp guy, right? Um, he was one of the main dudes behind the Paravis Ecomobile, and he is a really really sharp character. If you go back to like especially into the 80s and 90s, and some of the really early guys doing this, like I was on the other side of it. on the U.S. electric car side, but he was doing some really really sharp stuff in Florida as well. And what's interesting here is that all of these things that he says are absolutely correct for the battery packs and battery chemistry that he's familiar with. And it's not necessarily true universally. And similarly, there might be chemistries that behave differently from one to another and that benefit one way or another. I did an article almost 2 years ago now, I got to dig it up, about how um, why batteries lose the ability to charge, and kind of if you think about the ions and kind of the actual atoms moving back and forth as like little boats between the cathode and anode, and sometimes they kind of get lost in the middle of the transit during battery cycles or whatever else, and they don't have enough charge one way or another. So they end up just kind of floating in there. And it was just an analogy to think about it in a certain way. And how there was a team of researchers that was max loading the batteries super hard and then very quickly discharging them almost to zero. And that was enabling them to get back some of that capacity, in some cases 5, 10, 15% capacity. On the edge cases like 15%, but it was something like that. And I read that and I was like, wow, this is really good. This is the kind of information that's going to make me dangerous, because now I'm going to think that I know about battery chemistry.
Yes, exactly.
Right. But like, no, I just regurgitated the information and put my own little spin on it and all this. But there is so much difference and differentiation out there from vehicle to vehicle in a way that we haven't had in the automotive world since the early 1900s. I remember, if you know your history, in the 1910s through the 1920s, there were something like 300 car makers, and they were all making their own motors. They were all making their own transmissions. They were all making their own axles. And it wasn't until almost into the 80s and 90s that we got, what started to be called badge engineering, where there was kind of a standard engine and transmission in a Chevy that would go into a Pontiac, that would go into a Buick or a Volkswagen, where it would kind of front wheel drive unit that would go from a Golf into a Jetta, into a Passat, into an Audi A4, and that kind of modularity. And it's going to be a long time before we get these kind of hard and fast rules that come from modularity in the EV space, because it is changing so quickly.
Yeah, sort of where batteries are. Yeah, and so I believe that Tesla no longer, they used to recommend this and they no longer do. So I think the battery management system does this on its own now, and you're not supposed to charge up to 100% and down to 0 or 5 or whatever. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe that's the case. In the case of the MG4 that this reader noted is in the manual saying to do this, that's a very affordable EV. They may have cut costs on battery management and relying on owners to shuffle the chemicals around a bit on a monthly basis. I don't know, but yeah, overall though, the great news is I can be a little less stressed, a little more guilt-free using my free supercharger miles and not worrying about battery degradation.
Hi, my name is Scott Cooney. I started Clean Technica to promote clean energy and other sustainable alternatives, and for 13 years we've been moving markets. If we had a nickel for every time someone told us they bought their first EV, solar, e-bike, or fill in the blank clean energy solution, we'd be a cable TV channel by now. But we don't get those nickels. So unfortunately, we could use your help to reach a few more people. If just 1% of our audience chipped in a few bucks a month, we could hire dozens of great journalists and promote all sorts of climate solutions. It's easy. Just go to cleantechnica.com/support and sign up with a credit card in seconds. Cancel anytime. But we'll be sending out some cool perks too, so I think you'll want to stick around. With your support, we'll keep leading the charge. Thank you so much.
So the breaking news just before we got on here was Tesla released its quarterly deliveries and production numbers. They always have a very simple press release, so this is what they are. But I did a story yesterday about estimates for the quarter, because people are often curious about that. Troy Teslike, I think, does the best job tracking Tesla delivery and production data. He has a lot of different sources. He's mentioned in my article what they are, and he updates his forecast throughout the quarter. So early on in the quarter, he might end up being way off, but by the end of the quarter, he's often like real close to what ends up being reality. So his estimate was indeed very close. He estimated 441,000 deliveries, ended up being 435,000. So he was just 6,000 off. The Wall Street consensus, he said, was 455,000. So well above his estimate. Of course, there's some speculation that people knew. Well, the quarter over quarter numbers are down a bit because they had the Model 3 Highland refresh. They had retooling of the Shanghai factory. So numbers are down a bit quarter over quarter. So there's some speculation that people knew that, some people knew that would be the case. They put very high delivery estimates so that the stock would crash when the deliveries came out, and they were down quarterly and they're below the Wall Street consensus. I don't know. I'm not that much of a conspiracy guy, so I don't know, but it ended up being very close to his production estimate, and really, so everything is down a bit in his estimate because he estimates by factory and deliveries by region, Europe, US, Canada, China, and the rest of the world. And he had sort of estimates were down across the board, but they were severely down in China because of that factory retooling and the Highland refresh. So that's where it is. He was right. I think it's explainable, but there's still a question of, is the price war getting to Tesla? Is Tesla going to have a problem with keeping up its growth, its delivery growth? Is the Highland really going to stimulate that many more sales? These are all questions we've been asking already.
Well, I think it's interesting, right? Because I think Tesla has become big enough that it is starting to be affected by forces outside of its own control.
Oh, that's a good
Like,
line. That's a good line. I like
write
that.
that down. That's a good one.
It's a good concept.
No, but it's true. I think when you're a startup and you have an army of true believers, right? They can sort of force their will onto the company. They can drive its success forward as long as you still have an army of true believers, right? But now you're big enough, and your products are, and crucially, your products are affordable enough that if you want one of these, there's not a huge barrier preventing you from getting one. At least there's not a barrier that's more significant than the barrier preventing someone from getting a really nice Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla, right? Like we're talking about, in many markets, these vehicles are about the same price.
And let's just be frank. I mean, the buyers of Teslas before were a little more insulated from.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
you were not
I'm
in
just
a
trying to
mass
phrase
market scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just make it clear that, like, these were very rich people who could buy whatever they want, and they bought Teslas because they wanted to. Now Tesla's more mass market. What are the whims of the economy, of interest rates, of different things, and
that's it. There aren't 450,000 people who can just buy whatever the heck they want. Maybe there are, but there aren't 450,000 people every quarter that are new people who haven't bought one of these, who are just now deciding for the first time, let's go do it.
And actually, 50% growth forecast. So 450,000 this quarter, and it should be in a year
600,000.
It's almost 700,000. Which,
so is that? I mean, nobody's. We can. We're not professional gamblers here, but I'll bet you a Coke that they don't get that.
Well, the thing that we talk about this a lot, and I've talked about this for 10 years, and for a long time I've been on the side of Tesla's going to have the market demand. Like, they're going to keep growing like they expected. I have the feeling like some people are just under the impression like that story goes forever. Like, that just, because that was the case for 10 years, that's the case for the next 10 years. And
Oh yeah, that's absolutely what they believe.
Jose Pontes always talks about natural limits and sort of Tesla hitting its natural limits in some markets, and the other models too. He'll talk about that, like, oh, it sort of seems like this model's hit its natural limit for this class and this region. And I mean, the natural limit of Tesla sales, it can't be double or 50%. I mean, it can't be like double what it is now for these models. Like, I just don't think when you look,
That's the key point for these models.
yeah. And I mean, we still have to see the Cybertruck ramp up, but even so, like, I don't know. It's just when we looked at those sales charts last week, Tesla's 9th overall in the US among auto brands. It's climbing pretty high. It's getting close to the sun, we should say. Icarus flew in a similar trajectory for a while, like Tesla.
Well, let me throw another real big monkey wrench in here. How many cars does Tesla need to build before Wall Street starts pricing its stock like a car company?
That's another very good concept and question. I mean, I sort of just feel like it's starting to pivot right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just have the feeling.
Oh, I'm getting to you.
I have the feeling it's starting to pivot. And when the margins drop, the stock gets hit. As long as you're growing 50%, it's sort of like, okay, we're still playing this game. If the growth stops or slows a lot and margins get hit for a couple quarters, I think Wall Street says, okay, we're done with that story. Pull the money out. We're going somewhere else. And Tesla needs to get that back down to reality, like Toyota and Volkswagen and GM and Ford. They still have a very healthy balance sheet. They still have great margins. They still have a lot of growth potential. But
sure.
I think Elon said it very clearly in his biography. It all hinges on the robotaxi. Like, its enormous stock valuation is based on the idea that Tesla will, and some people say that's not priced in. Bullshit. That's priced in.
No, that is priced in. That is, I mean, the Cybertruck is priced in, and depending on who you talk to, the Cybertruck was priced in 3 years ago. So it's interesting times. I think Tesla can definitely keep growing at 50%, but they need more product. They can't do it with these products. And I don't think they need a cheaper sedan or a cheaper SUV. What they need is something much more conventional that can bring in mainstream buyers in that $45,000 to $60,000 price range, which is where the meat of the new car market is.
But then that's just competing with the 3 and the Y.
There's plenty of people out there who would never buy a 3 and a Y because they don't like the way it looks.
But Tesla's never going to bring something in that price range that's dramatically different from the 3 and the Y. I mean, I don't know. We'll
might
keep
not
checking in on this, but I think, I mean, look,
do you consider
for a long
Jeep
time
Wrangler?
we were at opposite ends of this story. I thought Tesla's going to grow like gangbusters. It's going to be enormous. I don't think you believe that for a long time now.
I didn't think he'd ever get the Model 3 in production. So I lost. I got that
and
wrong.
I mean, he barely did. So, a month here or there, and it could have been a different story. It was a lot closer than a lot of Tesla bulls acknowledged until later on, including myself. But I just don't feel like, I don't have the faith in the continued 50% a year growth that I had years ago and even in recent years. So I've switched.
One last point, as you consider how you switch on this. You've made the comment that they'd never bring out something that was as conceptually similar as the Model 3, Model Y. And to that, I say, look at the Jeep Wrangler versus the Jeep Cherokee. They're both about the same price, but they're radically different products.
Well, let me just say, with Elon as a CEO, like he's.
Well, there you go.
Like,
so maybe that's the
maybe
answer.
if Tim Cook took over or whoever. I mean, let's look at China. It's a good segue. So, I mean, one of the potential takeovers in CEO role is from China, and Tom.
That's right.
And China is they are leading the EV market in many ways, and they do not go the Tesla route. Those Chinese auto companies roll out like new models several times a year. They go the Volkswagen group, the the conventional route. So 39% of plug-in vehicle sales were of auto sales were plug-ins in China in August. That's for the year to date, it's 36%. 26% were full battery electrics, 24% year to date full battery electrics. So this is a very maturing EV market. Jose, and in this market now, does overall rankings and segment leaders across all powertrains. So the top 4 models in China are all all electric. Sorry, BYD Song, Tesla Model Y, BYD Chin Plus, BYD Seagull. A segment dominating, B segment doing well, C segment there's not much to choose from, D segment dominating. So you can see how it's working, how it's sort of just there. The market is maturing. But I mean, you look at these automakers, BYD's got 1 million models. Even the smaller companies, Li Auto has a few now. They're all full-size vehicles. They're all giant, like Escalade competitors, but there's 3 of them. If you look at Neo, Xpeng, they have several models. So I just, Tesla's still the odd man out with its approach.
Yeah. And again, if you're a tech company, this is how you do it, right? You design a MacBook that looks like a MacBook, and all the other MacBooks look like the same MacBook, right? So this is, I think that continues with this idea that Tesla's at least trying to maintain the facade that they're a tech company, as long as they can. So it is interesting, but I'm still stuck on what you said before, that if they get a conventional CEO in there from the automotive world who is maybe even from this Chinese market and really understands what's happening here, maybe they go a different way. Maybe we get a as insofar as robo-taxis go, I think a proper Tesla minivan wouldn't be a terrible idea.
Yeah, no, I think the Chinese market's so important to Tesla and everyone. But I mean, Tesla's getting about half its sales there, so it's it's got to keep winning there, and that's hard to do. And I think it would be easier to do. I mean, as long as Elon's ahead, they love Elon. But if he was to step down, I think you would want a Chinese CEO probably to keep the brand strong in China.
Would you want that?
I don't know. I think so.
What a great question. No, you would definitely want that. But it's such a great question of like, I think when most people read that the most American made car you could buy in the US is a Tesla, it's not a Ford, it's not a Chevrolet, it's not even a Honda, it's a Tesla. I think that blows a lot of people's minds because it's not thought of that way. So I don't think that they would actually lose a lot of customers by putting a Chinese CEO in there the way that Ford would, or the way that GM would.
I agree. Also, it's a tech company in a sense, so yeah, it's different. But one interesting thing here on the year-to-date sales, or first 8 months of the year, you can see the top 2 BYD models. They're selling, a lot of them are plug-in hybrids. So the plug-in hybrid market is still pretty big there. Well, at least for certain models. Yeah.
Well, but you can see, 13 and 14, line number 16, 17, 18, 20. Yep. Those are all kind of driven by the PHEV, as they like to say in the Midwest, and I do not like to say anywhere.
I'm looking for the actual split here.
Oh, you can see it's in the graph in the 20 best-selling electric vehicles in China.
Yeah.
It's a little bit low. There you go. Keep going. There you go. But so the dark red is
in the chart. I just mean like the overall split on the market, on the plug-in market, because he normally indicates like it's 60-40 battery electric.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know.
He should be in here somewhere, but
top auto brands.
Well, 30. So yeah, 2/3 battery electric. So it's 2/3 battery electric, but still there's certain models where they're selling a lot of plug-in hybrids.
Yeah. Which again, I'm fine with that. I prefer to be EVs, but I'm fine with that. I think as long as they're getting plugged in and people are driving them, great.
Yeah, this is just looking at the plug-in vehicle he will later on do a BEV split out. But if you look at just plug-in vehicles, BYD is dominating as an auto brand, 35% of plug-in vehicle sales in the country. And Tesla's number 2. So it's a big spot for a non-Chinese. And then for auto groups, 37%. Yep. All right. Well, this is just a brief announcement. Well, this is a big one, actually. So a lot of people
this is just a brief big one.
Well, a lot of people in South America have been begging for electric vehicles for a while.
That's right.
And the problem is when they do get them, which is not often, they're priced really high. So it's like, oh, we finally got a BEV, and they priced it to the moon. Like, what the heck? So Juan Diego, well, you can pronounce his name. You speak Spanish.
Oh gosh, hang on, I gotta open it now.
Oh, can you see it on the screen here? Sorry.
Juan Diego Salamin Mojica.
Yes, him. He's
Him.
He's our
I gotta say,
correspondent.
Well, hang on. We've been talking about this now behind the scenes. We're going to be launching an updated version of the Clean Technica website very soon. And one thing that I addressed on the back end was I hard coded the author bio links to be a darker blue because I can barely read that.
Oh my.
So
Yeah.
like,
Well,
it's like, no. It's a thicker font. It's a heavier font. And it's got a little bit more line weight, a little bit darker color, and you'll be able to read it. I swear.
Yeah. Well, he's in Colombia, but he's covering the whole South American and Latin American market. But the really exciting thing here is Volvo is bringing the EX30 to the market, and
yeah,
it's going to be decently priced, it seems like. So
yeah, it's going to be good. Yeah, it's going to be really good. And I think South America, Central America are kind of a surprise. I always get into this when I talk to anybody from BYD and how successful they are in South America, that we take for granted that we have sort of limitless access to gasoline, right? Like, well, there's a gas station on every corner. And if one of them doesn't have gas, the next one will. Everybody who was alive in the 70s certainly didn't feel that way or realized that that wasn't always the case. But certainly people who are in their, let's say age 50 and below probably feel that way, very confident in that. But in Central America and South America, that's not necessarily true. You might stumble upon the only gas station for 50 miles and they don't have any gas, or they may have bad gas with water in it or something that you can't use. So it might seem like there's no electric infrastructure there, but the reality is that gas station that has no gasoline probably still has power. And it may be 110 or 240 or whatever, and that may be as good as it gets, but that's still better than, well, we'll have gas here in 3 days. You know what I mean? You can't distill gasoline from sunshine and hopes and prayers, but you can distill electric power if you have any type of electricity and a little bit of patience. So I think this idea that the infrastructure is not good in Central and South America, and that's going to be a barrier to adoption for EVs, similar in Africa, Kenya, things like that. The infrastructure for everything is bad, and electricity seems to be a little bit better than fuel.
Yeah, but the really exciting thing here is that the price is really finally competitive. He highlights the price of the EX30 versus the BYD Atto 3 or Yuan Plus, and like it's $8,000. The Volvo EX30 is $8,000 cheaper in Mexico, $10,000 cheaper in Brazil, $5,000 cheaper in Colombia. So he's saying like BYD is going to have to cut prices. Like, bring it on. We finally get our EV price war down here.
Yeah.
And thank you, Volvo. And his other main appreciation for this is that they're bringing the whole might of the Volvo brand. There's not like a sub brand that's not as well regarded. It's Volvo. So it's really exciting. And he references in Costa Rica, where you have roots. The Geometry E came with a low price a couple months ago, and EV prices fell about 15% on average across the market. So just really highly needed, and big, huge appreciation for Volvo for bringing this with a competitive pricing to Latin America.
It's very confusing though, right? Because every government it's not like the EU or the United States where, these different individual states have pretty similar government. There's a whole lot of different stuff happening there. And he does make a good point of pointing out that in Argentina,
Yeah,
the Volvo is like 50% more expensive.
yeah.
And it's not really clear why. He makes the case. He sort of alludes to the idea that there's no competition in Argentina, so they just jacked up the price. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. It's
I'm
just
not
like you
sure that's
said, different
right.
markets. I mean,
Yeah,
it's coming at the same price as the BYD Atto 3, $60,000, whereas in other markets it's like undercutting the Atto 3 by a lot. It's the same in Chile as well, but Chile is much cheaper, so it's 38,000. This is all, US dollars, so it's $38,500 instead of 60,000 in Argentina. So I don't
yeah.
know what's going on in Argentina, but
Well, I mean, Argentina,
it's the Messi effect.
it is like
No,
I've shipped some. Well, no, so in my past life when we were doing tuner cars and race cars and stuff, we shipped engines and completed engines and also motor parts and turbo parts and things like that to South America. And Argentina, I can't speak to Argentina, but Chile certainly had huge tariffs on there, huge taxes. So like, we'd charge somebody 20 grand for an engine and they'd get there and they would have to spend another 50% in taxes just to bring it in.
I think that's a
And
big
that led
problem in
to,
Brazil.
it is, it is. And, there's some shady guys out there that are like, well, just say that it's engine parts and that you're sending us engine parts and put a lower value on it. We're like,
Uh-huh.
no, like this, could you imagine? Like, that's the last thing I need. Like, I'm already, basically sending you a drag racing engine, God knows what with overseas. Like, you're going to pay what you're going to pay, dude. I'm sorry. Just pretend that ours costs more. But yeah, I think that this might be a similar thing where even though, the Volvo is tax exempt in some South American countries, other countries are just going to wang it.
And I would just note, like, Volvo seems to sneak its way into every show, and this is not because Joe's a Volvo fangirl. This is like, this is just they're really, there's a smaller company, but they're doing a lot. So, they just have
But
notable
think of the
news.
difference that you have a company that is committed to environmental carbon neutrality and progressive causes. I mean, they had their Super Bowl commercial was two men getting married years before anybody else would even say pride. You know what I mean? This is what this company is all about. And they were doing the ocean race models that were using recycled ocean plastic literally in 2011. So I think that because we are a clean tech site and we're excited by things that are moving the needle in an environmentally positive way, when you have an entire company that really makes that a serious part of their mission and takes that job seriously, they're going to make their way into more conversations. And when you have another company that's cynical about it, or another company that says out of one side of their mouth, we're all committed to EVs, then on the other side of their mouth says, check out the new 7,000-pound Lincoln Navigator, we're going to talk about them less because it doesn't seem authentic. It doesn't seem as genuine, right?
Yeah. So we have another Volvo story here.
Sweet Jeebus. Oh, this is cool. So again, this is a teaser image. This random website that we found leaked these 3 days ago. This was in China, and a couple of press pictures emerged that were teasers that were showing off what is believed to be the new Volvo minivan. So this is what they think is a spy image, the Zeekr 09 based minivan. And this is going to come out with Volvo headlights, Volvo taillights, Volvo interior, and presumably a Volvo safety rating. There's a couple of things that are mission critical here. For Volvo to deliver a minivan makes perfect sense because the soccer moms all over Oak Park are driving XC60s and XC90s. A minivan for them makes perfect sense. I think the two probably most common vehicles, at the AYSO soccer games that we go to are Chrysler Pacificas and Volvo XC90s. There's a couple of Teslas in there, but they're just not as common. They're not big enough. So it's really interesting to see this. I think a minivan from Volvo makes perfect marketing sense. I think that is like a standard family thing. but Volvo absolutely has to nail the safety. This is the first time that they've gone into a completely new market segment since Geely, their Chinese owners, came into power, and this thing just has to be the safest minivan on the market, which unfortunately is kind of a low bar. If you ever watch like a Nissan Quest crash video, you'll be horrified. I always thought that was a beautiful looking van, had a great interior, but like after watching the crash test videos, I'd never put my kids in it. And I think, the Chrysler Pacifica, yeah, it's okay. Toyota Sienna, Honda Odyssey, yeah, they're fine compared to other minivans. Like if you had a Dodge Caravan growing up, this is way better than that. These modern minivans are definitely superior, but they could be safer. They could be better, especially for rear seat passengers. So I think if Volvo really cracks the code on this, they figured out how to make a big open box stiff enough and rigid enough to deliver, the levels of safety that we've come to expect from brands like Volvo and Saab. I think this will be just a grand slam home run for them.
Well, people keep going into bigger and bigger vehicles, and this is definitely looking to be a giant vehicle, which doesn't exactly fit the Volvo culture that we were talking about. But it's
look,
where people are, it's where the market is, and
but think of the most common Volvo on the road, which is the 60,000 pound or 40,000 pound rather VN 900 semi truck. You got to remember who you're talking about. These are all still tiny Volvos. like Volvo,
so,
you talk to a Volvo guy about big vehicles, he's going to bring you an excavator.
So one funny thing, this is a Zeekr,
yeah,
009, which is Zeekr is also a brand under the Geely automotive group, as well as Volvo cars. So it looks quite similar. There's a lot.
It's going to be very similar.
It looks like the same vehicle with different logo and branding.
But those already look like Volvo seats.
Like
that looks like a Volvo interior. You're going to see very minimal changes.
Yeah, I'm not even really sure like the Zeekr brand, like what its purpose is, just to get people who don't want a traditional brand. And
no, it's Zeekr does a couple of things. It's very techy. You don't buy a Zeekr, you subscribe to Zeekr.
Yeah.
So that's part of it where you're kind of just making your payment. You always have the hot new thing. But I think also we talk about brands a lot on the show, and Volvo is a very, I don't want to say conservative because that has political connotations, but the type of person who, it's a traditional thing. It's not like, a lot of people would feel weird driving a Volvo up to a nightclub, right? In the way that you would not driving an Audi, if you're,
or a Zeekr.
Well, no, but a Zeekr, I think, especially in markets where newness is a plus, right?
Yeah.
Especially new money markets. You're looking at, Russia, China. Well, not Russia anymore. You can't buy anything there, but you're looking at, parts of Eastern Europe. You're looking at Asian brands. You're looking at, certain markets in the United States, whether it's California, New York, where a thing being new gives it a bonus point. The exact same vehicle being a Volvo, the exact same vehicle being a Polestar, the fact that it has a new brand, a new name, not the thing that, drove me to soccer camp when I was 8 years old, that has value and meaning to somebody, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. So Zeekr kind of fulfills that role where maybe there's, someone successful, new money, who's not going to buy a Volvo because, whatever, the brand doesn't do it for them. And they're going to be all over this because they love the technology. They love the look and feel of it. And there you go.
Yeah, and actually, it looks quite similar to one of these Li Auto vehicles, which, as I said, is the hottest EV startup in China. Their 3 full-size vehicles are all top 20 vehicles in China. Now, it's just mind-boggling growth, and nobody, I think, really saw it coming. But this Zeekr looks very similar to that. And then if you look at the
you're talking about the Li 9.
There's the 7, the 8, and the 9, and they're all full size. And they're all in the top 20 now. I think the 9 is the most recent one to come out. But if you look at the door handles, the top of the vehicle, this is the same vehicle. Obviously, the headlights are a little bit
Volvanized.
It's Volvo versus Zeekr, but it's the same car.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
which is great. I mean,
Which, I mean, it
that's
looks really good. If you look at here, I like this view because, I mean, this just shows you what you were talking about. Like, this is a modern minivan.
yeah. And if you look at the middle row seats, they're on tracks, so they can
Yep.
go way, way, way back and recline, and you're basically just laying down back there.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I would ride that to the airport. I'd be really excited to sit in that and go to the airport.
Yeah, looks good. Looks sharp. We also have Northvolt has selected Quebec for its North American battery factory. That's the deal. One interesting thing here, you know, we talk a lot about the EV the subsidies provided by the Inflation Reduction Act, and so you would think, why didn't it go to the U.S.? But what Steve discusses here is that Canada and Quebec, they're offering their own subsidy packages to match the Inflation Reduction Act subsidies. So now, you know, it's even ground again. It's just there's subsidies everywhere. So you can go to Canada still, use their hydroelectricity or whatever, and get the subsidies that you would get from the Inflation Reduction Act. So just helping to stimulate the market more. This is, I don't know how much you read or want to discuss this, but Volkswagen's cut EV production, canceled a new Wolfsburg factory, sort of killed the plans that Herbert Diess had for how it was gonna go about electrifying and being more like Tesla. And it seems that Oliver Bloom came in and said, nah, we're not doing your thing, Dice. We're doing my thing, whatever that.
Yeah, I haven't read too much about this. I just know that, you know, when Bloom came in, and I think most of the VW board were not real big fans of what Diess was doing.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that he was conceptually wrong. I think the goal was, let's be more like Tesla, and then our stock will behave more like Tesla stock, and we'll have a whole bunch more money. So they started making all these investments. The stock pump that they were hoping for didn't happen, at least not in the way that they wanted it to. And so now they're looking at this and going, wait a minute, do we really want to do any of this? Or do we want to keep doing what we know works and generates a profit and sells cars? And yeah, and I think that that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, they've sort of bombed on software. They didn't do well on the software side, and I think that was the death knell. But in this case, you know, they're supposed to be using a new electric car architecture called Trinity. A $2 billion factory in Wolfsburg was supposed to be built. That's all been apparently axed, and Bloom is like, no, that's not what we're doing. We're not gonna try to jump into acrobatics and become Tesla to
Yeah.
keep
You
going.
know, what I want to see
Also,
happen here. Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was saying that a few years ago, we were writing articles about when Ford gave up on sedans for the United States and the North American market, when they said, we're just not going to build any of these cars for the US. We might still build them in Europe and in Asia, but we're not selling sedans in the US. They don't sell, they're not profitable, we're done. There was a lot of talk about using Volkswagen's EV architecture to produce Ford branded vehicles in Europe and Asia. And I'm wondering if this is more something that we can be seeing as a bigger picture kind of thing to better enable them to be in alliances with other big automakers in the same way that Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha are aligning on battery technology to be more aligned in the two-wheeled market.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, like, I mean, Dice was an outsider, so you know, he came in from BMW. It worked after Dieselgate, when they had to like clean house and be like, we're starting over, we're doing things totally different. Worked for a while, but at the end of the day, you know, these brands are very, you know, particular, and they're like, you know, sooner or later it's like, you're an outsider, Dice, you're trying to change too much of Volkswagen, time to go. Oliver Bloom came through Porsche, you know, more homegrown, we could say. And I think it was just like, you know, it just got a little uncomfortable how much he was trying to change stuff, and they were more conservatively like, no, we don't want to lose that much of Volkswagen, get out. And the funny line here from Steve's like, yeah, we know we know it's like after the sacking of Herbert Dice. Yes, we know he wasn't fired, but it seems nobody has heard anything from him in almost a year. Is he locked in a broom closet somewhere?
I mean,
Steve,
yeah.
I have seen him, but it's been a while. He popped up at for some. Yeah, I mean that's what they do. They give you an office job in the in the broom closet of a
Well,
small.
no, it's yeah, but it's funny that you say that, because a lot of these companies, this is a very European thing, and you see this a lot, especially in motorsports and Formula One and things like that, is this idea of gardening leave, where he's going to have to sit on the sidelines for a little while, whether it's a year or 2 years, with a non-compete clause, because he presumably has access to all of this, upcoming trade secret VW product lines that he could take to another company and presumably do some damage to VW. So I guarantee you, he's on some kind of administrative gardening leaves, and give it another year. I think maybe 24 months. After 2 years, it kind of doesn't matter what you know anymore.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be back somewhere. I am curious to know, because he's now the chairman of a chip maker. I'm curious to know if that's going to eventually lead him into a more Tesla role, right?
I don't know.
Whether
I
that's
think
going to drive him towards more AI type stuff.
I think he was very drawn to that stuff, saw that as the future, but didn't really have a grasp of it. I think he's a bit, it's not his element, So I think he tried hard to like be a leader in this new era, but he just wasn't equipped for it. So I don't know.
I'm going to disagree with you on that, and
Oh, really?
I don't think you're wrong.
That's
I don't think
interesting.
you're wrong, but I'm gonna disagree with you. I don't think that's what did him in. What did him in was he was early, because he was trying to go all in on things like AI, chip manufacturing. He was trying to, really kind of go it alone in terms of software. And a lot of these things were because of Tesla, yes. But if you think of the conversations he was trying to have about AI, about chipsets, about, systems integrations and things like that, if he had been having those conversations not in June and July of 2021, but June and July of 2023, in a post Chat GPT world, I think he would have been right on the money. But I think he was just too early and he was too far out there. Not to say that he really understood what he was saying, but I think he could have said the exact same things he did 2 years ago, and he would be right on the money right now. He was too early.
Yeah, I mean, I still just think too, he knew where the market's going. He wasn't equipped for it. But also they had a disaster in China. Their Chinese sales were horrible. So I think he just across the board was not succeeding at what he was supposed to be. Their software project did really badly. So I think just everything was like, you might talk a good game, but you're not you're not delivering. So last automotive thing here, Honda revealed more details and delivery timing for its Prologue EV. You have anything to say about this?
No. I think it's going to be, this is the first ever 6-lug Honda. Or maybe that's not true, but it's the first one that I'm familiar with.
The first ever what, Honda?
So
I didn't hear what you said. What, say it again?
6-lug. So if you look at the wheel pattern, the bolts, it's a 6-bolt pattern, that because it's based on the Ultium, basically the GM Ultium truck chassis.
It looks very cool.
It does. It's a great looking vehicle. But it's, mechanically very, 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 very similar to a Chevy Blazer. So it's going to be interesting to see if Honda customers care at all, because Honda is one of these things where you can be a Honda enthusiast and a Honda fanatic, but I think in the grand scheme of things, Honda is a commodity play, not a brand. It's not a branding image. We did that exercise of what does a Tesla hotel look like? We pretty much know. What does a Honda hotel look like? I couldn't tell you. What does a Honda restaurant look like? I have no idea. What does a Tesla restaurant look like? I'm pretty sure I've never seen any renderings of the diner. I'm pretty sure I could get about 80% of the way there.
I'm thinking like a basic Marriott for Honda. but
Yeah, but I think that's fair. But
days
Marriott
in maybe.
is a commodity.
Yeah.
If you woke up out of a coma and staggered out of a hotel room and started looking around a random hallway, and someone said, "You're in a Marriott or you're in a Hilton," you'd be like, "Yeah, okay." Like, I'm not going to doubt that, you
Yeah.
know, for the most part. I think I this will be an interesting experiment, because if Honda can just buy vehicles, put an H on it, and sell it in the US, we're going to see some Chinese Hondas.
Yeah, and it's notable this is using the Ultium platform. So this is a
Yep.
partnership with GM. It's supposed to be a $40,000, you know, midsize SUV with 300 miles of full electric range. That's compelling, you know. It looks cool. It's a Honda. I mean, a lot of people,
And it looks normal. It
looks
doesn't look,
normal. It
yeah.
looks like just the next generation of efficient Hondas. The question I have is how many they plan to produce and how much they try to sell them. So Honda has not given any evidence so far that it's trying to sell EVs. It's done the bare minimum with compliance car after compliance car. So is this going to be different using the Ultium platform from GM? I don't know. We'll see.
I think it'll be different in the sense that Honda has done this before. Let's
Yeah.
realize here that Honda has done this before. And what do I mean by this? In the late 90s, Honda bought a bunch of Isuzu Oasis minivans, literally changed the badge so that instead of saying Isuzu on it, it said, it's Isuzu Axiom, it said Honda Odyssey, right? To see how it went, to see if Honda buyers were ready for it. And then they redesigned it. The second generation Odyssey was all Honda. They did the same thing with the SUV. Their first SUV that Honda sold in the US was an Isuzu. It was an Isuzu Trooper. It was badged as an Acura SLX. And they sold it through their Acura things. They said, yeah, is there a market for this? You know, can our dealers sell an SUV? Will people come and buy an SUV from Honda? Yes, they will. Then they came out with their own, you know, their own Honda Passports and Pilots and things like that. This is going to be really interesting. I think the question here is not whether or not they can do that again successfully. It's whether or not Honda buyers ultimately know or care who is building the underpinning of the Hondas, or whether or not they trust that Honda name to say, okay, well, it's a Honda, so I can depend on it. It's going to be reliable. It's not going to fall apart. I'm going to get 15, 20 years out of this car. And if people are willing to swing on the name and swing on the badge, and they're willing to do it in the way that they've been buying Hondas since I've been alive, I think that we're going to start to see either more collaboration with American car makers, a much deeper collaboration to take advantage of those economies of scale, or we'll start seeing, you know, basically BYDs or something coming in from China that's just going to get a, you know, Honda QR check and a Honda badge, and that's what we're going to get. I think that we've already seen it. We've already seen it with the Honda Fit, right? That was a Chinese car that was sold here. I mean, Danielle has one. So I think we gotta consider that that's something that's in the back of Honda's head.
Well, they've got a lot of, you know, captive buyers. They have a huge market of committed, you know, captive buyers. And I mean, when I look at this vehicle, just looking at it, knowing it's supposed to be $40,000 base price, 300 miles of range, that could be a top selling EV on the market, no doubt about it. It's just whether Honda's committed to producing a lot and selling a lot. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But I mean, I think, as you were saying earlier, and just more generally, they're fine being slow to market, being cautious, and then when they feel that they're definitely ready, you know, having some of the highest sales on the market. So
Yeah.
maybe that's the time. Maybe it's ready for that. Maybe it's you know, it's more conservative than we probably think, but maybe it's, with its conservative culture, it's ready, and that's going to be a big hit. The last story is just $500 million for electric school buses from the Biden administration. Thanks, Biden. I think we all appreciate $500 million for electric school buses, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious about this, because if you look at the if you look at the policy and you look at what's being done and the progress that has been being made in this country, you got to just imagine the Biden administration, and Joe Biden's one of the most successful presidents in the history of our country. And if there was an election held today, Trump would beat him by 10 points. And Trump was like the worst, most pathetic, poop for brains, little-handed, baby-peckered idiot to ever do anything. And
Well,
somehow he's still leading in the polls.
well, they're like 36% head to head, supposedly. We have to keep in mind that a Republican hasn't won the popular vote in decades. They don't win the popular vote anymore.
Nor
But
should they.
But if they win a few key markets by 40,000 votes, they can win the election. And yeah, I mean, I find it a little depressing. Like Biden, as you said, he's passed the most significant climate legislation. He's gotten the most significant infrastructure legislation through. He's gotten the most significant onshoring legislation for blue-collar jobs through. And people just look at him and they're like, oh, you're old and I don't really believe in, you're a politician. I don't know. What have you done for me? It's like, a lot. Like,
I don't even know if it has.
Wake
Yeah,
up.
I don't even know if it has anything to do with him being old, because Trump is in his darn near in his 80s too, right? Like,
Yeah, Biden's
just
just a little bit quieter and older. Look, I mean, Trump just senile, but he's always been. I mean, his most recent stuff. He thought he was talking about Biden getting us into World War II, as if World War II is around the corner.
I think you mean 3. We already did a second one.
He talked about competing against Obama when it was obviously Obama's long retired. And he talked about Jeb Bush getting us into a war in the Middle East when that was his brother George W. So he's obviously losing it.
Jeb.
And he's got four indictments, 91 felony counts.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand how anyone would vote for him, but that is a sad case. And there's a lot of people are like, oh, Biden hasn't done anything. It's like, no, you just haven't paid any attention, because he's done.
Yeah, because you're watching. Look, we all know what news channel you're watching, and it ain't this one. So
or it's just, they're just not paying attention. I mean, people don't like politics. They don't pay attention to politics because it's annoying. But
look, if
the
you
fact
don't
of the
like
matter
politics,
is, he's done a
because
lot.
That's true. But if you can afford to not care about politics, that is an extremely luxurious and privileged position to be in. And a lot of people don't like hearing that, especially people who live in luxury and privilege.
Well, it's funny. There's a lot of rich people in the suburbs of Florida where I live who are like all about like revolution and 1776, like overthrowing the U.S. government. I'm like, do you realize how comfortable your life is? Do you really want to throw that all away because you got riled up about some stuff? Like,
but they're
dude,
stupid. Those people
you're
are
living
stupid.
the most comfortable, like, yeah.
My favorite line is, when Margaret and I first got married, she was really into like this, like, post-apocalyptic fiction. And I remember explaining to her, I'd be like, when I was a child in Costa Rica, like, it was worse than what you think of as post-apocalyptic. Like, there are billions of people right now who have it worse than the people in your post-apocalyptic fiction. So like, this is embarrassing that you're reading this, you're watching these movies like, what is it, like Walking Dead, this TV show, and like they have electricity and running water, and somehow they all manage to find a time to put on makeup and brush their teeth. And it's like, these people wandering around in the zombie apocalypse have it better than 2 billion people on planet Earth right now. So like, give me a break.
Yeah. Well, that is, I mean, I keep thinking, there's been a lot of things in the Tesla made for the zombie apocalypse, whether solar powered superchargers or the super air filter bio defense mode. And it's just it's that thing. It's like that, oh yeah, you're gonna survive the zombie apocalypse in your Tesla. It's just it's not, it doesn't really match. It sounds fun, it's interesting, it's very Hollywood, but yeah, being a privileged rich person driving a Tesla Model X and living in a zombie apocalypse are two very different things that will never
Exactly.
really go
Well,
together.
exactly right. And let's talk about this really quick here. What I love about this is that the communities that are most affected by air pollution typically are underserved, underprivileged communities that are exposed to older diesel fumes and older diesel particulate matter, and especially the kids, where it takes a much smaller amount of diesel particulate matter in the air to do some really lasting damage. Taking those old diesel buses off the road and replacing them with modern electrics that can not only get them back and forth to school without air pollution and without childhood asthma and other respiratory issues, but also serve as a battery backup for the school and serve as a battery backup for those communities in the event of power loss or hurricane damage or windstorms. I think this is a win-win. If you're against electric school buses for underprivileged kids, you're just a bad person. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing on the bottom here, EPA is accepting rebate applications from September 28th. That was the other day, to January 31st, 2024. So get yours in, and that's our show.
And we should actually put this out there. We should do this in an emailer that we should do this as a post about, try to petition your school district to submit an application for the rebate, because there's a bunch of school district managers out there in, like, Western Oklahoma or Wyoming. Well, there's nobody in Wyoming, but like South Dakota or something, who are just like, I don't believe in this green stuff. This is all hippie nonsense. But if they get a couple of letters from voters in there, they might change their tune.
No, we should do it. We should do a letter template that we share with our readers and with our subscribers, and
I'll put it on your to-do
make
list.
it easier. Yeah, put it on my to-do list. Go. Although it was your idea, so I think
Oh, I'll do it.
we'll do it together. It'll be more fun.
We'll do it together. We'll do
Put
it
it on
live
our
the
to-do
air.
list. Yes.
I'll put it on our to-do list.
All
All right, brother. We'll see
All
you
right.
tomorrow.
Peace.
Thanks for hosting this episode. I don't know what we'd do without you.
All right. Peace.